Coconuts TV. In recent weeks, thousands of pro-democracy protesters have occupied districts of Hong Kong to fight for universal suffrage. Overwhelmingly, this movement is supported by young people, but we wanted to talk to some outliers, young people who are against the Occupy movement. Anti-Occupiers are generally thought to be older. While we heard about many young people who are against the Occupy movement, only 3 were willing to speak to us on camera. My first stop was Shangwan, where I met Mr. Lee, a young professional. He asked to remain anonymous due to the sensitive nature of this issue, and wore a blue shirt as a symbol of support for the police. Lee disagrees with the behavior of the pro-democracy protesters.
They're not thinking of other people's livelihood, other people's freedom of using the road, other people's freedom of using transportation, kids going to school. Chinese society, it's always been about harmonious, peaceful, stability. And this is probably one of the few times where it's so away from that.
Do you actually disagree with their views then, or do you just disagree with the methodologies that they're using?
I also disagree with the views. Hong Kong has never had universal suffrage before. With the new policy, they are letting us choose from 1,200 people, but of course it can't be against the Chinese government.
Do you feel like you're a minority voice of the youth generation with your views being against the Occupy movement?
I do feel that a lot of people feel the same way as I do, but are just not willing to come out and say it. It's unfortunate in my own family. You know, my parents feel the same way as I do, but my brother himself doesn't, are really against me. You can see Hong Kong itself, okay? We're a family, and now it's a split family. So not just my own personal family, but the Hong Kong family is split.
How do you feel about the use of tear gas and pepper spray as a crackdown on these unarmed protesters?
This is our government's buildings, you know, it's equivalent to the White House in the US. I mean, if you don't know what the intentions are of these kids and they come into your building like that, you have to disperse them somehow. And I just can't think of a better way of doing that.
Jonathan Lee, a student at the University of Southern California, also disagrees with what he calls the disruptive nature of the pro-democracy protests, and he fears repercussions from China. We chatted via Skype.
First of all, China will not bend for a small little dot on the map. It is a risky movement, and that in itself is what made this whole movement something I personally do not agree totally with. China has given us an opportunity. Yes, you know, it may not be the most, it may not be the best options, you know, best choices, I agree, but still, it is progress. In Chinese, we have a saying, you know, we give you an inch, you ask for a foot, and that is exactly what I see amongst the students right now.
Jonathan's main concern seemed to be Hong Kong's economic progress, which he felt was lagging.
Anyone that lives outside of China, the first thing they think of China is communism, censorship, no Facebook, no Instagram, you know. But I asked if such things are as important. You know, yes, you have freedom of press, you have freedom to talk and say whatever you want, just like what we're doing right now. But would taking that away or keeping it, you know, how much does it do? You look at China. It's been progressing the past 10, 30 years. You look at Hong Kong. We are a one country, two system state. We are linked to China whatever we want to do. China provides us the military support. They provide us resources, water. What do we have to offer to China?
How do your peers feel about your views?
Oh, this is a very fun topic for me, actually. I have friends that do not support this Occupy movement. And then I have friends who support this Occupy movement. I ask my friends who do not support it, I say, why don't you guys voice up? They say, why should I? Why should we voice up? Every time someone says something, they are put down. They are called, as I've experienced, I am called a communist dog. I am called a Beijing dog. I am called all kinds of names.
Most people who are against the Occupy movement, like my last two interviewees, consider themselves part of the Blue Ribbon opposition group. They tend to be pro-Beijing and have concerns about how the protests are affecting Hong Kong's economy and daily life. However, my final interviewee's view was a bit more nuanced and unusual. We're here with Galvin. He is a young Hong Konger who is pro-democracy but anti-Occupy Central. So he is going to talk to us about why that is.
Well, I think democracy is broadly a good thing to have politically. I think it's definitely a form of government that we ought to move towards. Obviously, this whole non-violent direct action thing is a tremendous expression that has garnered attention from all over the world. But I think what I don't agree with is the idea of them only wanting a system of representative democracy, of them only wanting to be able to nominate their chief executive. I think they should be agitating for more. So in a sense, the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong are, in my eyes, not democratic enough.
But if you ultimately want even more democracy than they're agitating for, wouldn't this be a first step?
I think that's also a bit of a fallacy, because the first step in terms of the bigger picture is sending Beijing the wrong message. It's sending Beijing the message that Hong Kong is volatile, that Hong Kong is potentially a threat to the stability of China, and in that sense, it's going to crack down even harder.
What are you worried that the effects could be?
The hardliners in Beijing might perceive this as a serious threat to national integrity. It might dent the prospects of, say, the progressives in Beijing, who I know for a fact are genuinely interested in some version of democracy. That might put them away, and it might compel Beijing to clamp down harder than ever intended to in the first place. So it might sort of send us down the wrong path, so to speak. To be honest, I think one of the bigger questions that we aren't asking is what's going to happen in 2047 when Hong Kong loses its special administrative region suffix, and when it finally does well and truly return to China. I think that's the question we should also be thinking about and looking towards.
Speaking with Galvin made me wonder if the protest goals would become moot in 2047 when Hong Kong fully reverts to China. Are all these guys right that the protests are only going to lead to a crackdown by Beijing? Is this protest realistically going to achieve anything? The legacy of Tiananmen Square is certainly haunting. People have criticized Occupy Wall Street, claiming that it didn't achieve any tangible goals, but it did raise global awareness about poverty and income inequality. Perhaps even if Occupy Hong Kong doesn't result in truly democratic elections, its legacy may still change the political conversation in Hong Kong.